Welcome to the Marshall Pruitt Podcast, brought to you by Cooper Tires, the Justice Brothers, and for this week at Le Mans, Genetic Cars. We're doing another special feature, piggybacking off of Corvette Racing's Doug Feehan, bringing us 20 years worth of memories from Le Mans, actually doing the opposite, unfortunately, and that is saying farewell for the Ford GT program, run by Chip Ganassi Racing, bringing this 4-year visit to Le Mans to its conclusion. 2 cars run from the U.S., 2 cars run from the UK in the World Endurance Championship. We have 2 IMSA entries, 2 WEC entries, 4 cars saying farewell as a factory program. And for this look back on a somewhat brief but very popular and also very successful, immediately right out of the gate winning on their debut in 2016, we have the boss of Ford Performance, that being Mark Rushbrook, person who helped bring this to life. We then move on to dear friend of mine, one of the absolute heart and souls of this program, Joey Hand, from the cockpit of one of the Ford GTs, actually refers to himself lovingly as a GT O.G., having actually been there before the GT program lit off with Ford and Chip Ganassi Racing. And we close with Mike Hull, one of the dear friends of our podcast, managing director for Chip Ganassi Racing, and also someone who held a lifelong dream of competing at Le Mans, able to achieve that dream here with this GT program, now coming to an end again after 4 years. So we start with Mark, move to Joey, close with Mike, and hopefully you enjoy some of their tales, also some of the inside stories, the characters that have made this program a very memorable one. Brought to you here in the Marshall Pruitt Podcast, presented by Cooper Tires, the Justice Brothers, and Genetic Cars. So Mark Rushbrook, we're at something that wasn't unexpected, right? There's always going to be an end date for this glorious Ford GT program at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Might like to see if I can somehow extend this a few more years into the future, but knowing that 2019 is the planned conclusion of seeing these glorious Ford GTs in action at Circuit de la Sarthe, thought it'd just be fun, a little bit of a celebration, a little bit of a farewell type theme, just talking about the program as a whole. And I thought maybe let's start with its initial concepts and formation, knowing that a new Ford supercar had been announced. Where did the concept of making this really a purebred supercar that can also go racing and head to France and try and continue Ford's tradition of success there, where did that enter the frame in the Ford GT's initial concepts?
Well, what I saw coming into this job as the motorsports engineering manager back in December of 2013, it was already an idea. It wasn't approved at that point in time, but it was an idea. And that was part of my reason to accept the job, was knowing that there might be the possibility to work on a Ford GT program, on a racing program, and going back to Le Mans. So the official concept was there already by the end of 2013, and we worked through and got approval in 2014, and it was just tremendous to be a part of that and putting together the blocks of what would ultimately become the GT racing program, and great partners like Multimatic and Chip Ganassi Racing and Roush Yates Engines to be able to have it become a reality.
So looking at how this came together, how this was announced, was really happy and fortunate to be there for the announcement at Le Mans. Just pulling the covers off of that car in the room there, actually, as we were kind of staring at the Ford chicanes as well. The physical location of the unveiling was also well done. Why don't you share some thoughts, Mark, on just that day and the reactions that you saw from folks, from media, who, again, maybe had a good idea of what would be uncovered, but just the overall feeling of the blue oval coming back was something where they wanted to continue, add more victories to something that definitely in the 1960s is a huge, huge part of American sporting culture.
Yeah, it's something that because at that point in June of 2015, it's something that we had been working on for over a year and a half, but we couldn't openly talk about it and had to keep it secret for so long. But so many people knew that we were doing it or thought that we were doing it, but we could never confirm it. So in some sense, it was a big relief to finally be able to tell the world what we'd been working on and what they had suspected, and that it was true, and that we would, as a company and with great partners, be coming back the following year in 2016 to race the new Ford GT and try to celebrate the 50-year anniversary of the 66 win.
So this program, I think, became rather proudly adopted by many folks kind of right out of the gate. What do you recall from the early stages of just fan reception from maybe fellow drivers? Because obviously you had to select drivers that were going to represent the team. What do you recall from the early stages of getting this up and running as its debut, not just from a season-long championship phase in 2016, but also thinking about going to Le Mans and who you might put in there? What do you recall from just general reaction from fans and such about this new thing that was being formed?
Well, the reaction from the fans from before we announced it and with their anticipation of it, and after we announced it and got ready to go, it was so positive to have Ford coming in back into the sport at that level with that mission and with such a great history, so many people in support of it. As far as the drivers, and that was a great thing about the program, once it was announced and confirmed, or even before then, there were so many people that wanted to be part of the program, and especially the drivers, to be able to drive a Ford GT in a factory program with that very special mission, that it was fantastic going through the process of selecting those drivers, and with Chip and Mike Hall on the IMSA side of it, and with them also involved in the WEC side with George Howard Chappell and Larry Holt, to select the drivers not just as individual drivers, but as pairings in the cars and across all four cars, to make sure that we had the strongest lineup of drivers that would also get along and be part of the team. And that's part of what has made it so special. Is it's been a great team, from the drivers to the mechanics to the engineers, to be part of that, and something special, just like working at Ford Motor Company is special as part of the Ford family. We felt that extension in this program with our partners and all of the individuals involved, that it's been a tremendous journey together.
So looking back to this 2016 Le Mans debut, Mark, the outcome, well known, pretty amazing, winning on your debut. All right, well, set the bar a little high there, pal. You know, you might want to ease into it a little bit, but that seemed to be, boy, if you'd said we're going to go to Le Mans once with this new car, and however we do, that's just going to be the car's story, it would have been a fairy tale. I'd say it still has been amazing. Obviously, there's been maybe not the year-by-year success at Le Mans to match that, but there's definitely been some great news stories told. Let's talk about that 2016, though, that kicks things off. Sebastian Bourdais, a son of Le Mans, standing on the podium along with his teammates, Dirk Mueller, Joey Hand, also blasting Mr. Ford in the face with champagne up the nose, I believe. That was a great photo that I happened to capture, too.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're here, you know, looking, at least for now, with what Ford's doing, this is the end of this program. What comes to mind when you think back to how that 2016 race played out, the fight with the Ricci Competizione Ferrari, and then ultimately winning on your debut? It's dream-like stuff.
It's one of the things I realized in the middle of the 2016 race, because from the day I came in and joined this team in December of 2013, it was hard work 24/7 because we had such a aggressive goal and such a mission that the company had put us on, that I think clearly remember in the middle of that 2016 race, it suddenly struck me. It's like, holy cow, we've been working so hard on this for so long. Here I am. We are together in the middle of the race already. It was almost like, because we've been working so hard, didn't realize in some sense that we were getting there. And suddenly there we were in the middle of the race, and we had competitive cars, and it was a fantastic race, especially with Ferrari and the Ricci car. That it was almost surreal that suddenly, after working so hard, we were there in the race, and for it to play out as it did through the night, and finishing the race on Sunday, and being able to celebrate with Edsel Ford, who had been there 50 years earlier, and Bill Ford, and all of our senior management with Joe Hinrichs, and everybody, was just an unbelievable moment in the company's history. And to be there and be part of it, I felt so very, very lucky to be part of it. And as you said, even though we haven't had the wins in 2017 and 2018, we've had podiums, and we've had fantastic races and fantastic finishes. And even those have been an incredible part of the mission of what we're trying to do in terms of telling our story about our company and innovation and tech transfer. And winning a race is really, really hard, especially Le Mans. And even being on the podium is really, really hard. And it takes everything going right just to get on the podium. So we're proud that we've been able to be on the podium every year so far, and excited to go back this year with 4 great cars again, with drivers coming back and the same team members coming back, and looking forward to repeating again.
So looking at how this 2019 Swan Song at Le Mans is being offered, well, first of all, I'm a little bit mad at you, Mark, because I'm already trying to cut down on my scale model purchases. And with the 4 retro honoring liveries, plus the amazing Ben Keating livery with his GTE AM Ford GT, I can already tell there's 5 Ford GTs are going to be burning a hole in my pocket to buy those models. Tell us a little bit about that decision, though, because, for some manufacturers who announce ahead of time that, all right, this is going to be the end for us, they go, they celebrate, they do things, not necessarily always a big effort to also tie in tradition, but that has indeed been the way you and your team want to say farewell.
Yeah, it was a big decision. It was a hard decision, and the team will tell you I was one of the hardest to convince. And the discussion even went back to how were we going to bring the cars in 2016. There was some talk then of our first race back with the new cars having a celebration of the heritage liveries. And the decision made for 2016, which was not mine at the time, but was we want to create our own legacy, our own point in time. We want to have a livery that's recognizable 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now of the 4 GTs that raced in the 2016 timeframe. So that was the decision made for 2016, to have all 4 cars the same, to create that identity in that period of time. And that was, I think, definitely a great decision, and has worked out well, because instantly it's recognizable what that livery is. And yes, we changed colors, updated colors in 2018, but with the same scheme. So when we started talking about 2019 and what do we want to do, and there were a lot of discussions about the benefits of sticking with same livery as 2018, carrying it over to 2019, or celebrating in some way. And it started to feel right at that point, knowing what the future of the program was, and that it would be our last time back near term with 4 factory cars, that we wanted to celebrate it and not be sad about it, but we're proud of what the program has been, and wanted to make a connection to the 60s, 66 through 69, but do it in a way to tie it to the current car and celebrate. And the idea to use the 68 as the 2016 winner, to consider that one of the liveries that were historical liveries that we're celebrating, was, I felt, just a great way to do it, tying them together with common stripes, and especially with the AM car with Ben Keating and his team. We're there as a family. Again, all the 5 cars are related and connected, and a great way to celebrate the company and our presence at Le Mans.
2 last things to close, Mark. This is maybe looking a little bit to the future, and that's on the topic of these GTs. You and I had a conversation a couple months ago about how a relationship with someone like Ben Keating is something that you're really happy to have commenced, to have sold one of the fleet of GTs to him. You also told us that you and your team would be having additional conversations with others who've expressed interest in maybe continuing the Ford GT efforts, but on a private, non-factory level. Just curious if you can give us an update on just how that's going, because I know we're going to miss the factory efforts at Le Mans, but who knows? Hopefully Ben and maybe others will be there doing it as independent members of the Ford GT family.
Yeah, there's been great interest in the cars and in racing them, but just like it took time to set up the initial program, and as I mentioned, the importance of the right partners and the right people, that's where we've been going slow to make sure that we find the right pairings, because we believe these cars, we're biased obviously, but we believe these cars are very, very special, and want to make sure they have the right home and the right way to continue on track in the future. So stay tuned. More to come.
Well, let's close on this, Mark. Is there a memory of the Le Mans visits that you've done so far, knowing that there's still obviously one more to complete here in a few days, but is there a personal memory that stands out to you from this Ford GT project that hit the circuit in 2016 that you cherish, you take pride in, or maybe a tale you're going to be telling kids and family and friends for years to come?
Am I allowed to tie in Daytona?
You can tie in whatever you want, brother. Again, the program isn't ending overall this weekend at Le Mans, but we know that we still have some good stuff in IMSA, but tie in whatever you like, because we're just trying to pay tribute to something that's been pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's, to me, and it's been well documented, so maybe it's an easy answer, but it was so personal to me and to the team. But obviously the way we started with this car at the 24 Hours of Daytona in 2016, and certainly suffering some setbacks and issues that hadn't shown themselves despite all the testing that we had done in preparation. But as hard as it was to suffer that at Le Mans or at Daytona in 2016, what I even felt during that race, as that suffering was going on, was how strong the team stayed together. Because when we had our issues, we didn't just pack up the cars and go home. We worked on resolving those issues, and we said, this is our opportunity to get a real 24-hour test. And we used that to learn through that race and to work very, very hard after Daytona, because we knew we had to be on the top of our game just 5 months later at Le Mans. So it pulled the team together stronger than we had been before Daytona, and galvanized us and helped us attack Le Mans in June and to be successful. So it was that, to me, that experience and how much stronger it made us for success.
Well, I wish I could be there to see you guys turn your final lap at Le Mans, but definitely just as a lifelong sports car racing fan, I realize that I do this kind of sort of for a living, but this podcast of mine here, it's more of a passion project. Thanks for everything you guys have done. We don't know what the future holds. That's not what today's conversation is about, but definitely hope that we are not seeing the Blue Oval sign off from Le Mans for too long, because you guys are a heck of a lot of fun and have really helped us to tell some really, really engaging stories since this program commenced.
Yeah, it's been great, everything that we've done, and definitely appreciate the relationship with you and how we work together. It's all good.
Joey Hand, you are getting ready to make your final appearance in a factory Ford GT at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Knowing that you came into this program, you want to talk about a true program OG, even though it's only a couple of years ago. You were hired before the Ford GTs were a thing, so maybe we should start there. What was the situation like? What were the conversations like when you were looking to come over and join the Ford folks, the Chip Ganassi Racing team, originally when it was a Daytona prototype effort, while I believe the GT program was being thought about and crafted in the background?
Yeah, well, I guess that makes me an OG TG, right? The original GT guy. I think that's what it is, OG TG. Yeah, that's, the interesting thing is I didn't know anything about, to be honest with you, I didn't know the GT stuff was coming down the pipe. They weren't telling me that even. I came to Chip because, Chip's like, hey, come drive for me at the backside of the pits in Atlanta, the Petite Le Mans race in 2014. I'm like, yeah, sounds good, Chip. And he's like, I got some good things going. We got some great stuff going forward. It's going to be great. But I can't tell you all about it right now. So it took a little bit. I signed up with Chip, and I knew for sure we were going to be running the DP car, and I was going to drive with Scott Pruitt, and I knew all that part. And that was cool enough for me. And then as I got into, got closer in there, and we started doing the DP stuff, and they're like, oh, this is what's coming down the pipe. We're going to take this engine we've been developing, and we're going to run it in a Ford GT, and we're going back to try and win Le Mans on the 50th anniversary. So, since then, remembering those days of talking about it, since then I've learned a lot more about the history of Ford. I wasn't that switched on to the whole Ford Ferrari thing, in the 60s. I didn't really get it until we started talking about going back, and I started read the books and look at the history and stuff like that. And then it started to click a little bit on kind of how big of a deal it was, how much history there was and how much opportunity of making history there was for us again, so, but it was cool to be the original guy. It got me the better spot in the lockers, in the truck. So I got to pick. And Briscoe, since I was already there, I got the best spot. Briscoe got the second best spot. So he had already been at the team with IndyCar stuff.
Yeah.
So, and then Dirk and Westy got the, average spots where they got to share one pole to hang their clothes on. So I had that going for me.
The biggest shocker here, Joey, and full credit to Ford, they got you to read a book. Holy crap!
Yeah, actually,
your teachers. Have you told all your teachers throughout the years? Like, I know I really didn't listen to anything you told me, and I pretended to read during your classes, but finally, at the age of 30, whatever, I read a book.
Yeah, that's actually true. You know me so well. I'm not a huge book reader, so I get all my stuff from Men's Health. Everything I know, my high school Jeopardy level is all thanks to Men's Health. As they say it on the top of the magazine, 100% useful. So,
Joey Hand,
Racer magazine is what's filled up in my bag.
You're just a gem of a human being. So yeah. We're obviously celebrating, I don't want to say the premature end. It's just with as cool of a program as the Ford GT effort has been, especially here at home. And obviously we still have a couple more months of that, but also in particular Le Mans, which we're celebrating this week. Let's talk about first impressions. So You're racing with Not My Brother, Scott Pruitt, and DPs. You kind of get read in privately. You get the old top secret folder to flip open and take a look at the GT that's being built. Tell us about some of the initial impressions of the car. I think you also mentioned something funny when we spoke yesterday about efforts to kind of hide that the original car and such being swapped around from transporter to transporter. But what were those early kind of revealing to the world days like when you knew the GT was definitely on the road to being completed?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first thing you saw was, we saw the renderings in all black and carbon fiber, and then, I actually got to see the car, the original test mule they were running up in Toronto. I think Scott Maxwell was driving it originally. And you never know what somebody's going to come up with, a designer, I had no idea. I thought, man, I hope they do this right. Hope they don't screw it up. And, man, the first look, I was like, whoa, that's cooler than I thought it was going to be. And very few cars, I think, look good from all angles. And this is, sure, I drive it, and sure, I've won in it now. But when I first saw it, I was like, this thing, they got this right. Like, this is one of the badass cars I've ever seen, and probably was going to go down in history no matter what, is the feeling you got right when you saw it, But yeah, I mean, it was a super secretive thing. And I was telling you, like what I was talking about was one of the funny early things is Scott and I we were finishing up the season of DP. They had got the first test car built for the Ganassi program to go run at, Daytona, and Scott and I were going to do the driving originally. And we were finishing up Petit Le Mans, and they wanted to do this swap over. They brought that GT test car in like a box van or something. I think they brought in another truck, and they wanted to swap before the end of the race. They wanted to get the GT into our race truck. And when we were done with the prototype, they were going to put that into the other truck, and we were just going to head off to Daytona, and nobody's going to know about it, right? Well, that's the year, 2014, where it rained and rained and rained. They red flagged the race, started it, all that. So when they were preparing to get this thing out of there, when they thought everybody was going to be like kind of heading towards the podium and all that, they called the race early.
Yeah, I think it was 2015. Yeah, it was brutal.
Yeah, 2015. Sorry, yeah, 2015. And yeah, they called the race early, and this thing's just coming off the truck, and here comes all the fans. And we got it down. They had to pull to get that car in our trucks. Still today, they have to pull the side windows out, and one of the crew guys climbs in and out of the window, Dukes of Hazzard style, because the doors open up so far outwards and upwards, they can't get in through the doors normally. So they're in there, like first time they ever seen the car, really trying to figure out how to pull the windows off, and everybody's like, "Whoa, wait a second, what's that?" And so this brand new black, all carboned out Ford GT is sitting in our tent. And all of a sudden, there's where all the first pictures came from. So, kind of it was going as the plan until they called the race, and then there's everybody standing there. So that was a funny start to it. But Scott and I got to go drive it that week at Daytona, and you get your first impression, you're like, man, this thing actually turns really good across the apex. It stops well. You're looking for the problem, and you're like, this thing really could be. This thing's got a lot of potential. So, and obviously now we know it really did have a lot of potential.
And you are coming from being with BMW for many years, a lot of success, obviously, champion, right? Winning championships with BMW, winning all the big races in the American Le Mans series as a factory BMW guy in the same exact class. So you obviously have a pretty healthy background in knowing what a GT car should feel like, what it should do. You also, with your open wheel background and your prototype experience, know the inherent limitations you often find with a road-based, a production-based car that's been turned into a full GT machine in racing form. So that part I think is really interesting, though, Joey, because you had lived for years in whatever really cool BMW, knowing that, all right, it's not going to tick all the boxes that I could wish for if I had, say, a purebred IndyCar or prototype. The fact that the GT really did remind you more of those cars than a road car definitely speaks to, I think, just how amazing the design is.
Absolutely. And that's, I've been lucky over the years. I mean, I've got to roll out a lot of new cars when I was with BMW and develop a lot of new stuff. Even in Toy Atlantic days, I was in the rollout for the Swift 014 chassis, and, that took some development when we did it. And, I've just spent a lot of time on development work, whatever it is, suspension, dampers, tires, brakes, you name it. I've got to do a lot of stuff. And so this car had everything new. It was a new tire from Michelin. It was brakes that we hadn't run. It was suspension that had never been run. The more impressive part about it is that most of the cars I had rolled out as a race car had been a street car already in the past. This car hadn't been a street car yet. You know what I mean? This car was, the race car beat the street car to the asphalt, if you will. So it didn't have it's not like the street car had been out driving around and people got to see it or even, I hadn't driven a street car version. I just jumped in the race car the first time and that's what we got to. And so, that was my original feel. The other thing is, moving the GT class moved a big step that year. That's the year that they added a lot more downforce. So bigger diffusers, bigger splitters, bigger wings, more dive planes, all that kind of stuff. So it was also just a different car to drive a little bit. So closer. The cool thing was it was closer to drive to a prototype, and even kind of closer to the DTM stuff that I had just most recently done. So it was. Let's just say it was a very good first shot, that they did. I mean, they did a great job from aesthetic design of it, making it look like a Ford GT from the 60s a little, having that historical look to it, but still being very, very technically advanced from what the cars were in the 60s, obviously, so it was fun to get in that. And, it's like anything. When you look back at something, it ends up being a lot cooler, I guess you could say.
Sure.
When you're in the moment, you're like, well, this is cool, but it's just another day driving race cars, developing something to go fast, right? Like just doing my job here. But now that we get to look back and we're talking about it and the things you're bringing up, it's like, man, this all really played out really well. I mean, this was, first of all, thought out well. And second of all, just played well, and, the fact winning in 2016 at Le Mans and 17 at Daytona, I mean, this is really a book you couldn't even imagine to write, you know what I mean? So it's pretty cool to be, I'm excited to be part of it, being able to see it from the beginning. It wasn't long after that first drive at Daytona that, we started getting Westy in and Dirk in and Briscoe in, and then we got to go see where they're building the cars in this, Skunk Works project in the basement at Dearborn, and got to be part of the design of the steering wheel for the street car, like the final design and some of the knobs, and sit in the actual street car seats and see the different concept ideas they were doing with it. And just see how they did it. They designed our suits. Our suits were on the walls. This one room had our suits on the walls, our team shirts, everything from the steering wheel and the wheels of the street car around this wall of this design center. At the very end was the race car stuff with our suit designs that I'm still wearing at Le Mans this year. So just a super advanced look. The way they did this thing was just still kind of mind-boggling.
Joey, let's talk about an aspect of this program that I know you are particularly fond of, and it's the people. So that might sound like an obvious thing. In every sport, the players credit the team for their success, as they should, but I know that that's often a bit of a kind of a rote thing. But
yeah,
in this case, we can truly say from Phil Banks to Matt Swan to Mike O'Gara to, again, we can run down the list on the crew side. These are not only some amazing people in terms of skill, this is a good group of bastards. Like, you have the group. If you guys were not in racing, I could still see you inviting all of them over for barbecue. You know, this would be your barbecue buddies. This would be your softball team, you know, regional softball team and whatnot. Let's just talk about the people that you work with that have made up this program, because you guys really have something special here.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. You know, I mean, that's where I always want to be ever since the IndyCar days when I was chasing Chip and Mike Hall around Laguna Seca. Watching Zanardi and Master Montoya drive there. I mean, I've been chasing the Ganassi thing for a while. So to drive on that team was basically a dream, but I didn't really, when I was young, I didn't know why exactly that team was so good, you know? And when you get into the program, you know, I spent 1 year just, you know, at Ganassi with the prototype before we moved even to the Ford GT. You recognize really quick that it's about the people. It's very strongly about the people. And you recognize that, holy cow, there's guys here, not just like a couple, but most of the place. You have guys at Chip Ganassi Racing that, you know, they didn't just end up at the top of the heap at the shop. You know, they've all, you know, like Mike Hall, he was a former Ford mechanic years ago, and he worked his way up, and now he's running Chip Ganassi Racing and has been for a while, one of the most successful race teams in the history of racing. And that's the kind of guys you have. You know, my car chief, Tyler Reese, has worked his way up and was on the IndyCar program, then came back for the Ford GT program. And, you know, Mike O'Gara, he's been all over. But, you know, Ford did it was pretty smart of Ford to first of all, hook up with Chip Ganassi Racing. But then there's a lot of parts of this that, you know, a lot of people don't know about. Multimatic was the main design of the car with Larry Holt and his crew. And then Ford Performance is involved, but then so is Roush Yates engines. So there's so many little things you could have a lot of difficulties with working with, you know, 4 or 5 huge entities, but it's been a program that everybody worked so good together. I mean, we have a core group of guys from Roush Yates, a core group from Ford Performance, and then of course all of our Ganassi guys, and that core group for Multimatic. And but you're right, especially our team guys, like on our car, the 66 and 67 guys. I mean, it's funny you say it's the guys you would have over for a barbecue, because it truly is. And I keep telling guys, you come to California, my house is open. We're going to do something at Hand Splash. We're going to barbecue some smash burgers at Hand Splash. And I haven't quite got right there, but at Watkins Glen every year, so coming up even a couple weeks from now, right around 4th of July, we stay at a Staybridge Suites there in Corning, and they have a, you know, basketball hoop, and they have cornhole. We barbecue out there, and everybody has a great time. So it really is the mega team, like the team that you want to be on, because I'm all about, you know me, I'm all about like the comfort, right? And I'm a big believer that comfort brings results. And it doesn't just mean like the car's working for you and all that. It also means that when you get out of the car, you feel like everybody's on your side, you know, like no matter if you did it good job or not so good job. And that's the way these guys are. They're more uplifting than any program I've been with. They're always like, hey, don't worry about it, man. We're going to get them. If you say, hey, I need something in the cockpit change, I've never seen it. Like, there's no like, oh man, we got to work. No, it's like, is that going to make us faster? Great. Let's do it. Perfect. No problem. Do it. So it's just been it's been a fun time. It is a great group of guys. And, you know, you just couldn't write it, you know, but when you do read some of the history, you're like, not far off of what happened in the 60s, to be honest. Like, a couple groups came together, a couple key players, and a lot of good people, and huge success. So, yeah, it's a place it's a group of people that I would love to, you know, run my career out with. That's for sure.
Let's start winding down, Joey, with another topic that's a personal source of fun. So you get to drive with some crazy bastards. You and Dirk Mueller have been a really not only successful but fun and funky pairing for a really long time. You've got the Frenchiest of French in Sebastian Bourdais as one of your co-conspirators. Across the garage, you have Richard Westbrook, who, despite all of his failings in terms of personality and character, is not a bad race car driver. You've got Ryan Briscoe, who is he's hilarious and ridiculously talented. There's some other guy that I believe joins them in the endurance races as well. Anyways, all kidding aside, this team has been pretty amazing if we are looking at the driver rotation that you have been with for many years now, and definitely going back to Le Mans. Tell me about working with these guys, and if you can, share some stories about working with these nut jobs on and off the track.
Well, funky and fun that's a funny way. It is funky and fun. If funky, when you get into our changing room there, that's definitely funky after a race. But it's a cool group. I mean, that's all credit to Chip and Mike Hall. You know, they have a way of picking people for success. It's really unbelievable to me. But you know, you would never have thought back in the BMW days when Dirk and I got together, it was like, whoa, a German living in Switzerland and a American from California are going to be great teammates. I don't know about that, but you know, we have a lot in common, and you know, we're like that married couple where one has one thing and one has the other, and that's what makes it work. You know, I'm more of the laid back version. Dirk's always like, hey, we need to do this, we need to do that. And I'm like, there's a time for it. Let's think about it here. Let's just think it out, you know, but we can do that as a team. We're good at like talking it out, thinking it out, and then jamming these things at John Hennick and Mike O'Gara to see which ones they think will work too. But, yeah. And then you got the Bordeaux, as I call him, you got him sliding in there, and you're like, oh, this has just got a recipe for disaster now. A German, a Californian, and a Frenchman. Yeah. But he slides right in, man. And, you know, tons of respect for that guy because he can wheel, you know, he'll wheel an IndyCar one day and the next day he's driving with us. And I know how hard that is. I've done it before where you go back and forth like that. And, you know, it's just, but there's a lot of good times. I mean, one thing is, I bet people wouldn't believe how much Mexican food we eat. One week deep into the 2017 season, I think it was, we ate Mexican food, at least Dirk and I don't want to say Westy and Briscoe all the time, but they're there a lot of the times. Don't let them fool you. But Dirk and I ate Mexican food 7 times in 6 days. So
are we talking Taco Bell or actual sit down?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you love yourselves a little bit. Okay.
Oh, we go and eat. Yeah, we find places. This was in Atlanta. This was a period of time where we went testing Atlanta and racing in VIR, like this longer trip. And that's how it ended up being, you know, like 6 days. And so we have these couple places, not couple, everywhere we race and go in the country and the world, we have these Mexican places we found. Obviously more so in the U.S., not so much in Europe because it's tough to find Mexican in Europe. But, you know, we're kind of creatures of habits, you know. Sebring, done. We got a couple places there. You know, wherever we go, we got Mexican food. In Le Mans, it's pizza. Every night, I told the guys the other day, I'm like, I've only eaten hospitality in this one pizza place in the city center of Le Mans. That's the only place I've eaten. And the guy's like, every time I walk in, the French guy there goes, deja vu. And every time I laugh, even if I was just there for the test day. First time I saw him in a year, deja vu. Next day, deja vu. I was like, you're funny, man. But he doesn't speak English, so that's all he knows. So that's our thing, deja vu.
So anyway, you've got this 4-time Champ Car champion as your endurance partner in your entry, and I was just being a little bit obtuse earlier, but you've got now a 5-time IndyCar Series champion in Scott Dixon, across the way in the Westy and Briscoe mobile for the endurance races. And as you pointed out, and I just think this deserves just another acknowledgement, if we're just talking fame in motor racing, when Bourdais comes and drives with you guys, he is by far the most well-known because of these, big IndyCar championships. Scott Dixon as well, one of the most successful IndyCar drivers of all time. When he comes in, obviously a huge name. One might think that these two open-wheel stars parachuting in might steal some glory or have put on airs or whatever else. But the point you're raising here, which, again, I just hope folks are able to appreciate, it's the exact opposite.
Two of the coolest cats I know, period. And there's 9 championships across the two of them. You know what I mean? Dixie, winning championships recently and being the guy to beat every week, he just rolls in and, what's up, dude? What's up, bro? Just like that every time. What's up, bro? I'm like, what's up, Dixie? And just go about our thing, man. Just they hop in, they drive. Same with Bourdais. Bourdais and I, when we first came in, you're new to each other, but now 4 years down the road, we're buddies. I texted him right after the Indy 500 this year. I'm like, dude, that sucked. And he's like, car was tough in traffic, this and that, whatever. But it's just, we're buddies. We text him back and forth, whatever. And they don't, Sebastian, he knows what he's getting into. Dirk and I are there every week. We're tuning on the car every week. And it's definitely, these guys do a quick switch. They go from being they're the number one at an IndyCar deal. There's not even another driver. It's them. Like the seat fittage is for them. The car handling's for them. And they got to roll into this, and they got to just drive with this, like, especially for Bordeaux, you got to drive what this German and this California kid came up with and deal with it. And, I'm sure it's a big culture shock every week they show up, but they're still cool about it. They still roll in and get the job done. And, that's what's fun. The Ganassi program has always been about team players. That's the big thing at Chip Ganassi Racing is team players. And it's definitely that in the driver lineup for sure. And they don't, Mike Hull will tell you right straight up. And Chip Ganassi will tell you we're all about team players. And it just goes right down the list. The crew guys, Mike Hull, Chip, all team players. And that's these guys are the same way. They found the right crew.
Well, let's close on this, knowing that you are preparing to do your final 24 hours of competition with the factory Ford GT effort. What comes to mind, Joey, in terms of favorite memories of the 24-hour events you've done with this team starting in 2016? Are there any particular times in the car at one of the handful of events that you just really hold on to as like, wow, that was special? Or being on the podium spraying champagne, share some of those thoughts.
Always winning Le Mans, especially the way we won it, man. In 2016, that's going to be one of the biggest things that ever happened to me, no matter what. To go back on cue 50 years later to the day to win that race, exactly what Ford wanted to do, that's always going to be huge. But, in that race, I was in the car that made the final pass on the Ferrari. We had worked on, Dirk was in the car and was working on run down the Ferrari. Then I caught him from 14 seconds back, passed him on the Mulsanne straight. And, that was a big one to me, especially looking back at like the documentary or any of the highlights, even some of the highlights Ford Performance just put out. When I do that pass on the Ferrari, the whole garage erupts. Bill Ford and Etzel and Henry Ford and everybody erupts as like that happened, and that was, we never gave it back after that. We set sail, made a gap, and I was in the race. But that was a big one to me. But I think just the times, everything has been, just feels like, to be honest with you, with just saying what I feel, it feels like somebody could write a book about this, which they did, but even more so than just the 2016 win at Le Mans, just the people, like you said, these crew guys we got some of the most famous crew guys in racing on our team, and not just like a couple. Like the whole crew is famous. I just feel like we've got a crew to write about. And I think that's going to be the thing that always sticks with me.
Well, my friend, I hope that this final blast around Circuit de la Sarthe is something that you can enjoy, soak it in. I know you and the rest of the team have jobs to do, so it's a little hard to be misty-eyed and nostalgic while trying to chuck your car down the inside of a Corvette or a Porsche or whatever, but I hope you're able to walk away at the end of Sunday with a real sense of pride and appreciation for what you and the team have helped done, and also to just help the Blue Oval write another really cool chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we got a shot at it. This year again, I think we got a shot to put another win up there. We got 4 cars that can do it. I think I got a really good feeling. I was real comfy at the test day, so I think we got a good look at it. But you never know what's going to happen. We don't know what the future holds here. I think there's tons of possibilities, but we're going to go for it. That's for sure.
Mr. Hull, we have what is sadly the culmination of the Ford GT program at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Again, from a factory standpoint, who knows if some privateers will represent the cars in the future, but thought it might be interesting as we do say farewell this weekend. Share some thoughts on how this program came to life, how Ford Chip Ganassi Racing got these twin-turbo V6 supercars up to speed so quickly, also what it's been like trying to remain competitive in a balance of performance world. So not sure where we should start, but maybe how about forming this European team, the European aspect of Ford Chip Ganassi Racing that is definitely half of the fighting strength this weekend at Le Mans.
I think maybe that's a good foundational point. The Ford wanted to recreate in the current landscape something similar to what they did in the 60s, which is they had multiple teams running GT40s simultaneously in hopes that they would win the race. One team would excel with a combination of drivers, preparation, strategy, and the rest in order to be able to do that. So when the opportunity came to us to be able to be part of a global program, not just a North American program that would go to Le Mans, it's pretty hard to pass that up. So that meant that there were 4 cars at Le Mans that were run under the banner of Chip Ganassi Racing, 2 of which were in the WEC series, the global series, and were prepared in the UK, and 2 of which were for the IMSA series, the North American series. And the difference probably is today that there was a total share of information between the 2 teams, and not necessarily a competitive situation between the teams, which is maybe slightly different than what they had in the 60s, from what I've read anyway, and what I've heard. That was the first thing. The second thing is Doug Yates was very instrumental in helping to put this thing together. He had gone to Ford and said to them, you need to try to get one of the best teams, if you can, involved in the project. And so that began for us well before the GT car was a car. That helped us when we were when we were still prototype racing in the DP series in North America, so that the engine side, the engine and the engine package could be developed prior to the start of the GT car itself. So the GT car was already happening. Nobody knew about it. We worked on the engine side of thing, and the accessory package, the turbos, the way they're fed, the way they're cooled, all the rest of the things in the DP car for 2 solid years, which include being able to electronically control the engine, map the engine, and do all the things that were necessary to race the engine. So that then fed itself right into the GT car when it was time to go. And Doug was certainly very instrumental in all of that. And the relationship there has been very strong across both forms of GT racing, both the WEC program and the IMSA program. So that's in common. And that information has been fed back and forth across the Atlantic to help the car to try to minimize the problems the cars could have, or to try to reduce trial and error with what was going on. So I think that was really, really good. And then the second thing that was in common, obviously, is the Ford family. And they were primary and instrumental in driving the program forward. They found a great group of people in Multimatic that designed the car. And I think that they found a group of people in motor racing who understand how to race a car, and that would be Chip Ganassi Racing. So when you think about all those moving parts and the fact that they were put together well in advance, the process itself revealed as we went along in racing how well founded and how well researched it was before it began.
You know, one thing that stands out, Mike, and this isn't just trying to blow smoke, but knowing Chip Ganassi Racing's history of working with multiple major auto manufacturers in racing initiatives. So I don't just mean getting an engine supply from pick the brand, but actually true full integration on the marketing side, engineering side, et cetera, et cetera. That to me really stands out as one of the core aspects that allowed Ford Chip Ganassi Racing, the Ford brand itself, Ford Performance. You mentioned the Roush Yates folks looking at Multimatic. I mean, we can even go down to Michelin, and I'm sure there are some other vendor/partners I'm forgetting, but the ability to come straight out of the box and win your very first 24 hours of Le Mans. Not saying other teams could not do that, but I do believe the decades of experience, whether it's sports cars, Indy cars, NASCAR, there's something innate within the experience of this group that allowed you all to take that experience of integrating with manufacturers and key partners and make this really effective right away.
I think that's right. I think maybe, when we went to Le Mans the very first year with all four cars running in the race, I don't know that the competition thought too much about us. It was like the first year of racing there, and I'm sure they thought, oh, well, those guys are going to have a lot of issues, particularly the people from the United States, because they don't understand how to race here. And they're going to go through all the teething issues that they go through in the first year based on the experiences that they've had over time. So I think we were probably overlooked, which helped us. And when the race was over, there was a great comment from Chip. And it was from one of the Ford family members. And he said to Chip, I didn't think we could win like the first year, right? And Chip said, I did. That may not seem like a big deal, but we worked really, really hard to be ready. Frankly, we thought, and it's very accurate, it's a very huge mountain to climb for an IMSA team to go to Le Mans. And it would be a very big mountain to climb for a WEC team to come and race in IMSA at the beginning, simply because of the way the race itself is administered and what you have to do to race, in this case, at Le Mans. What Le Mans does is it rewards raw speed for 24 hours and the least amount of time in the pit lane. Racing in the United States is about that, but it's somewhat regulated because the pit lane closes in the United States, which allows everyone to pack up, and it allows lapped cars to get their lap back. Whereas at Le Mans, you don't race like that. it's really a terrific place to race, because if you have a fast car and you're flawless, you're going to be at the front at the end no matter what. If you fall behind at Le Mans, there would need to be a lunar eclipse for you to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the only way you're going to catch up is for the people that are leading to fall out of the race. So you race as hard as you can at Le Mans if you're behind, even if you're on the lead lap, in hopes that your competitors have an issue, so that makes up the time deficit. So it's a totally different way to race, and I love it, because you just race your car as fast as you can. And you have drivers who rotate through the car that understand that basic concept. And if they've grown up racing just in IMSA, it's way, way different than what they're used to doing. So that part in itself, winning in the first year, the American team winning in the first year, to me was extraordinary, because it goes against a lot of the things that we do in preparation for a race in North America in sports car racing. Since that time, once everybody realized that we were on the map, they've made it more difficult for us to do that with BOP. But in reaction to that, good race teams work around the BOP regulation, and they work on racecraft harder. They work on their program harder. They work on all those things, and you have to retain a very positive attitude about what you're going to get out of the car on a given day. And I think we've done a really good job with that, with both the WEC team and the IMSA team. And we'll go to Le Mans with that same attitude and see what it gives us this year.
So as a bit of a man of the people, Mr. Hull, would love to get your thoughts on how you have seen this Ford GT program has been received. And where you have an interesting datum point is you obviously ran and facilitated a Ford DP program. So you were part of the Blue Oval family, if we're talking in sports cars, before the GTs came along, transitioned from one to the next. But you got a feel for how folks received having the Ford name in prototypes. What have you seen in the now fourth year of this GT program of how folks receive actual production-based Ford GT cars fighting against Corvettes, Porsches, BMWs, Ferraris, Aston Martins? What have folks told you since they've made this move?
You don't see it as much we didn't see it as much in prototype racing with the Ford package as we did. What we didn't see as much of was in the GT racing, the passion of street automobile people. They are very, very restricted almost in what they think we should be racing or who we should be racing against. You have people who are Corvette people. You have people who are Porsche people. You have people who are BMW people. You have people who are Ford people, and so on. And it is like cutthroat, passionate people. And they're either for you or they aren't. And so you do see that much more so in GT style racing than you do, I think, in prototype racing. Perhaps in North America, as it goes forward with what IMSA is doing, that will change. It probably will. But they directly associate with what they drive on the street with what we race on the racetrack. And I've been absolutely amazed at the people that have just come up out of the crowd and say, I remember this and I remember that about Ford racing here and Ford racing here and Ford racing here. And you'll have somebody who is now generationally challenged like I am, that say, I remember in the 60s what happened. I remember how they beat Ferrari at Le Mans. I remember what Henry Ford II did to push motor racing. That was so huge for us. And we see today so much of that. it makes it fun. And I would say about Ford Motor Company, in terms of being a manufacturer of automobiles, the family itself is still directly involved in their product. And they take such pride in their product because of their heritage and their lineage. And it means a lot to them for the car to win, because they represent, as family members, their entire company. And it goes back to, the sweepstakes time with Henry Ford himself, and how he put himself on the map in terms of being able to produce a production automobile by winning money in winning a motor race. And it means a lot to them to generationally carry that down the field. And it means a lot to us to be part of that family, because we feel the passion from the family members themselves.
Mike, let's close on reflections and stories. You're one of my favorite storytellers. I've only told you this 100 times. You share any thoughts about what will now be the team's fourth visit to Le Mans? Obviously, we're talking about the previous three, but are there any stories you can share from the events, battles during the race, any moments behind the scenes?
I don't know about stories. We could probably do something, but the thing is as an American, you read about Le Mans. You read about the history of Le Mans. You read about the great drivers who have driven there, and some have won and some have never won there, that tried to win. But you don't realize as an American, until you've gone there, the magnitude of the event. It's not just a motor race. It's a globally significant event. And after the race is over, they cannot control the spectators. And you better get out of the way, because they're going to surf right over the top of you. And when that entire front straightaway fills up with spectators, you realize how many people are actually at the event. It's a little hidden because of the length of a lap and where they camp and what they do. But I just could not believe that, first of all. Then secondly, when we won the first year, it was a very emotional experience for myself and certainly all the people that work for us, because we finished first and third in that race. And the team that finished second was the Ricci team with a Ferrari. So that was a little bit of a throwback deal. And but they were all three American entrants. So when the GTE Pro part of the podium happened, there were nine drivers that came out there, three for each car, and they raised three American flags on the podium and played the United States national anthem. That gave you such a feel of pride for the fact that you were representing the United States in an international event, and the podium totally represented that. And to me, that was, I don't know that I'll ever quite experience anything like that. And I felt afterwards, this is what Olympic athletes must feel like, or people that race, or are involved in sporting events in foreign countries, when as an American you win. That was such a almost a that's one of life's moments for me in motor racing that I'll always remember and I'll always cherish. I think everybody took pride in that. In the first year that we were there, when we won the race, there were a lot of people whose last name was Ford. And we all felt like we won it for them. we could see the pride in their faces and the emotion that they outwardly displayed, and we realized how important it was to that family to represent them there, and I thought that was really terrific. And then I would say that I think the French they kind of take it on the chin by a lot of people in the United States. And for us, that's very unfounded, because what they did was they put their arms around us and they accepted us at face value when we first arrived there. And we didn't know what to expect, but the expectation was met with the reality of such a positive experience. They made sure that we understood what we needed to do. They coached us through all the process, from walking in the front door with administration, through the technical program, through racing itself. And they didn't make it easy for us, but they didn't make it hard for us either. And they understood that we were there to race. And I think that when everything was done, or when this whole situation is over, at least presently for us, we would look forward to representing a factory and going back to race at Le Mans. And I think that they would accept us in return. And it's been such a terrific experience. And you can see then how important that race is to win again. And it would be great to win that race again.
Well, let's close on this then, Mike. So we don't know what the future will hold on the Chip Ganassi Racing side. Obviously, Le Mans is the swan song for the WEC program, this being the conclusion of the super season. We know that we have the IMSA side of the Ford GT effort and its finale here in a couple of months at Petit Le Mans. Don't know what will happen in terms of the amazing crew and engineers and everything that's been put together. Obviously, we're hoping to read in the coming months that they will be working on something different, but staying in the sports car space. Until we get to that news, if and when it does happen, maybe just share some thoughts about some of the folks who have come together. I don't know if I want to say behind the scenes, but those that, whether they're tightening bolts, making calls on setup changes or strategy, driving a truck. This is really this team itself, as Joey Hand told me, the team itself, not the drivers, not the big names, not those necessarily just named Ford, but those whose names might not be known by the public. They deserve a book on their efforts alone. Maybe you can share some stories about some of those folks and what's made them so unique to make this team so unique.
I think every team member that we have, no matter where they started life at Chip Ganassi Racing and have ended, and their present position is on the IMSA team, on the sports car team. What's great about the culture at Chip Ganassi Racing is that they support each other, and they're very unselfish in what they do. And I understand what Joey's saying, because when you step inside the ropes at Chip Ganassi Racing, everyone is treated equally, and we all sense success and failure together. Success drives it upward, but failure is probably more important because it makes you work. You don't work any harder, but it helps you to think outside the boundary. And I think that we listen to each other when that happens. And it doesn't really matter what your vocation is at Chip Ganassi Racing. We listen to you. When the IndyCar team's in trouble and everybody's in the building, the sports car guys pitch in. When the sports car team is in trouble and the IndyCar group is there, they pitch in. And for me, that's probably what I remember more about going to work every day, is the fact that people aren't afraid to help each other. And the drivers that work for us on the IMSA team, the two permanent drivers in each car, and then Sebastian and Dixon, who drive as third drivers, understand that everything is right for them when they step in the car. And that gives them a lot of confidence that you might not have in some forms of motorsports. And I think that trying really, really hard to leave everything done rather than undone is what our group of people do well. And those are the things that I'll remember. And the roster itself is filled with very special people who care about making a difference and have set their mark in motor racing. And that whole group of people will look back someday at what they did and realize how important it actually has been for, first of all, for themselves and for Chip Ganassi Racing, but more importantly, the mark they've left on motor racing in this particular era of time, this particular aspect of time. And you know what? The next program, they'll do well with the next program as a group of people. So hopefully we can announce that soon.
Thanks again to Mark Rushbrook, Joey Hand, and Mike Hull for helping us to take a brief tour down memory lane. Wasn't that long of a lane to begin with. We were hoping certainly it would be longer, but nonetheless, confident the Chip Ganassi folks will indeed be back in sports car racing next year, running someone's program, at least in the U.S. Very possible the Multimatic side that runs the effort out of the UK, they are working hard to try and keep the cars possibly in privateer hands in the WEC for the next super season. So still some news to come there, and very hopeful that these GTs do not go away altogether, even if the factory is no longer entering them going forward. All right, I am Marshall Pruitt. This is the Marshall Pruitt Podcast, brought to you by Cooper Tires, the Justice Brothers, and Genetic Cars. Thank you for listening.